So today we'll be looking at the stored procedure and what are the stored procedure. We will talk about this, and we will also cover all these three or 4 points in this particular video. So what is stored procedure? That's the first question that comes in our mind, and why we have to use it. So stored procedures are nothing but it's a database object which contain one or more SQL statement. Okay, what does it mean? You write certain SQL statement or SQL queries, and then you store it in a certain object in a database, and then you call that object to get an output, right? So instead of writing the big queries or writing the entire SQL statement, you only have to call one particular keyword or the object to get the output of the entire SQL statement. The SQL statement can be one or more that is linked to that particular object. The word stored procedure is a self-explanatory. When you look at the term stored means it's need to be saved somewhere, right? And procedure means the function. So the procedure which has been stored are known as stored procedure, and the procedure in this case contain the SQL statement, and that SQL statement is linked to certain database object. So let's quickly get to the these 4 pointers of the stored procedure. So first I will start with the syntax. Look at the syntax of the stored procedure. So this is the syntax, right? We have to write create, okay, and then procedure and procedure name, okay. So this is the object name, this is the database object name actually, whatever name you give here, that will be database object name, okay. And then if you want to declare some parameters, like if you have to pass certain values, that's what we do in the function, right? We have a function, we can pass parameter to the function, and that parameter, based on those parameters, that function executes itself and give us a certain output. In similar fashion, like any programming, it will, like this stored procedure can, it's optional obviously, it can accept a parameters, one or more parameters, right? So parameters are declared like this, like you have to put @ symbol here, okay, and then you have to give the parameter name, and then the data types, like what is the data type of that particular parameters that is required, okay. Again, the size of that particular value actually, so what will be the length of the value of that particular parameter, okay. Then you have to put as a keyword, okay, and then you have to put your SQL statement, like select something from table name where any column name is equals to the parameter that you have defined above, right? So this is the way to write the SQL initiate a stored procedure. Actually, once you execute this particular query, it will create a stored procedure with the name of a procedure name that you have given here, okay. Let's suppose you put any xyz, so xyz will be the database object or the procedure name that will be created, and when you have to call this procedure or when you have to use this particular procedure, you have to write this piece of code, okay, only this. So what happens is you have to write exec, which stands for execute, and then procedure name, and then if there is a parameter, in this case we have one parameter, right? So we will put @parameter1 is equals to whatever value you want, okay. We will look into it in detail in the further steps, okay. So you can define actually multiple parameters in the same fashion, like let's suppose you have defined 3 parameters in the stored procedure, then you can write @parameter3 is equals to val3, okay. So this is the exact syntax of declaring a procedure and creating a object, database object, or the procedure name, which you can access it later. This is a syntax for executing a procedure or getting data from that particular procedure, okay. And this will be the parameters, and these are the values that we have to pass while calling those functions. Same way we do in the programming, right? Now let's move to the after this syntax. Now let's cover this, why to use procedure. It will make more sense, right? So why we need to use the procedure? So first thing, it will reduce the network traffic, right? So how it will reduce the network traffic, that's the question, right? So like we seen earlier, right, we do not have to send entire query. Obviously this query doesn't need to be this small, like select asterisk from table where column name is parameters. This query may be of 20 lines, 50 lines, 60 lines of code, right? So when you execute of 60 line of codes, you have to send the entire data through the network to the database server, right? Then database server compiler compiles it, executes it, and then it's returned the data to the client, right? So in this way, there is lot of network latency or network dependencies are there, right? If your network is slow, it will increase the latency of the server or the total like request to response time, right? So how a stored procedure helps in this? So once you create this piece of code, okay, you get one object name which will be the procedure name, and what you have to do is you have to only call the procedure name, which will be like something like this: execute procedure and parameter along with this parameter, right? So what will happen when you call them? So the line of code is reduced significantly, like it's now one or hardly one line of code, right? But in actual real life SQL, we can have 100 lines of code, 200 lines of code, right? So that network traffic dependency is reduced, due to which the performance will increase security. So how it's increasing the security? So obviously you might have heard the term abstraction, right? So it's providing an abstraction in this case in the terms of SQL Server. So what it does, it now I am being a user, now I have only worry about how many number of parameters we can pass to that particular procedure, right? And what is the procedure name? That's it. He doesn't have to understand the entire complexity of the database and the tables from which the data is being fetched or getting merged, right? So in this case, it will increase the security of the database, and it's easier for the users to access it and also use it, right? The third advantage and the biggest advantage is reusability. What does it mean? You create one procedure, you write like certain lines of code, SQL statement at once, okay, and then you can reuse it anywhere you want just by calling that particular objects or that particular procedure, right? So this is the most effective way of using a stored procedure, because it provides us the reusability, and which is a big advantage, right? Fourth is consistency. Let's take an example of banking sector. So in banking sector, what happens is there is a front end application, and they pass certain like the city or the branch ID, they put the branch ID, then click execute. What's happening, it's called the procedure with the branch ID as a parameter, and it's get the data, and that data gets displayed on the screen. So in the same fashion, it provide consistency. There is not lot of document to maintain and to understand to write the code. So it's easier for developer, it's easier for the database administrator, and it's also easier in the terms of developing an application. Moving on to the next, when to use stored procedure, right? So obviously when we have to provide the abstraction, then we have to use the stored procedure, right? Abstraction means obviously like hiding the complexity and just showing high level information to the users, right? Security, obviously when we have to increase the security, we don't want our tables or the table name or the data types to be exposed to the every single user. Then we create a stored procedure, and those procedure names are shared with the users, right? And obviously this code reusability, when we do not want to write the same SQL query again and again, then once it's created, we can assign it to a certain objects in the database, and that object can be used multiple times by multiple user, depend on the access actually. So these are the few use cases when we have to apply the stored procedure, okay? Now we will jump on to the parameters in the stored procedure and how it works, and the syntax of the stored procedure, right? Already we have covered the syntax, but we will check it on the W3 schools actually. On W3 schools also we can find a stored procedure is a prepaid SQL code that you can save so that code can be reused over and over again, right? So obviously the first line is talking about the reusability of the code. You can reuse the code again and again when required. And let's look at the syntax here. Okay, so the first part of it shows us how to create a stored procedure. Actually, the create procedure name as and the SQL statement, whatever SQL statement we need to pass, and then go. This part is an optional. It works in certain databases, it doesn't work in certain databases. So in Microsoft SQL Server, you do not have to write go, you have to only pass the SQL statement and it will work fine. Okay, moving on to the next. Again, to execute the stored procedure, you have to again write like this, exec stored procedure name. Okay, now moving down, stored procedure example. Okay, so create stored procedure, select all customer as, and then passing this particular SQL statement, select asterisk from customer and then go, right? So what it does, it will create a select all customers as a procedure name. Okay, and this procedure contains the data or output of this particular query, and whenever you want the output of this particular query, from now on you do not have to write this entire query itself, you only have to call this particular function or procedure and it will return the output of this particular query. Okay, so this is how it works. And now stored procedure with the parameters. Obviously it's a procedure, so procedure can have a parameters itself. Parameter might be a single parameter or multiple parameter, it depends upon how you have created the procedure. If you have created the procedure with single parameters, it will accept single parameter. If you have created with the multi parameters, it will accept the multi parameters. Okay, so again, creating a procedure with the single parameters is, here is an example. So create procedure and this. Okay, this is the procedure name and this is the parameter name. Obviously parameter name start with @. Okay, so @city, and this is a data type of the parameter actually. So city will be n varchar and it should be 30 character long, max 30 character. Okay, not more than that. So it's a 0 to 30 character actually. So again, this as an alias, and then passing this particular SQL statement, select asterisk from customer where city is equals to @city. So what happens is, this particular statement, like this entire statement, will be stored in select all customer procedure name. Okay, and this procedure will have one parameter city. So whenever you want to call this particular procedure, you have to pass the city name. Okay, once you pass the city name by calling this particular procedure, what it will do is, on the back end it will call this, but it will execute actually this particular SQL statement and place the parameter name that you have passed over here, right? So this is the way it executes in the backend actually. So this is the example of its execution. So what you did, you call the procedure actually with the city name as a London. Okay, so you assign London to this particular city parameter, and this particular parameter has been passed to this particular SQL statement. So basically it's work like select asterisk from customer where city is equals to London, but obviously this is a procedure that's stored in the backend. So this is the way you can call the function, right? In any language, not only in SQL, in any language, this is the way you call the function, right? Stored procedure with multiple parameters. Okay, so we will look at this part. So it's a similar one. Okay, it's again like create procedure name, and then you have to pass the parameter 1, their data types and their size, comma parameter 2, their data type, their size, comma parameter 3, their data type and their size, right? As then you have to pass like this, select whatever the column name you want from customers where city is equals to @city and postal code is equals to @postal code, and let's suppose country is equals to @country. Okay, and when you call this particular procedure, now you can see here like this is the way end user use it. Okay, so execute select all customer, and we have to pass all the parameters and their values. So city is equals to London, postal code is equals to this. If there is a country like @country is equals to India, and once you execute this particular query, you will get the. So I think this is all for the procedure, and this is how they are used. Okay. So this thing can be used by the developers. Obviously, if you are data analyst or the business analyst, you can only use the reusability part of these procedures. So if you have to write the queries, there is a certain query that you have to write again and again, and you have a hard time storing it or keeping it somewhere, then you can create a procedure in the databases. Okay. And by using those procedures, you can put any meaningful name, and by using those procedure name, you can run those queries, or it will be easier for your juniors as well to, or the any other, like if you are a product analyst or business analyst, then your managers and anyone can access. They do not have to understand the complexity of the query itself, or how it's working, from which table data is being pulled. So you only just have to provide one single keyword to them, and they can execute those keywords to get the data. So it's a very helpful if you start using it into your day-to-day life in your work, and also it's reduced lot of stress of keeping the query, organizing them, maintaining the documentation, informing people about the complexity of the database and tables and how joins has been performed. So it hides all those things, and only you have to provide is just one keyword, and that keyword will do the task. So stored procedure, this is the way how stored procedure work, and that's why it's very important or integral part in the SQL. Thanks a lot for watching. I hope you like the video. Then share with your friends and do subscribe and like. Thanks. Bye.